Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle immediately.
Officer, I don't understand. This is my car. I live in this neighborhood. Here's my driver's license and my federal judicial identification.
I said step out of the car now. This vehicle has been reported stolen and you're under arrest for grand theft auto.
What? I am Judge...
The body camera footage captured everything. Every devastating second of what would become one of the most shocking cases of racial profiling in modern American history. It was 3:47 in the afternoon on a crisp Tuesday in March when Judge Pamela Wagner turned onto her quiet, tree-lined street after another demanding day at the federal courthouse. She had just finished presiding over a complex employment discrimination case and was looking forward to a peaceful evening at home, perhaps catching up on some reading before dinner. But within minutes, her entire world would be turned upside down. Judge Pamela Wagner was no ordinary citizen. At 54 years old, she had spent nearly 2 decades on the federal bench, earning a reputation as one of the most respected jurists in the district. She grew up in a middle-class family where her parents, both educators, taught her that excellence, integrity, music, and unwavering commitment to justice were the keys to success in America. After graduating magna cum laude from Georgetown Law School, she spent 12 years as a civil rights attorney, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves, then another 6 years in private practice before receiving the call that would define her career, a presidential appointment to the federal bench. Her colleagues described her as brilliant, compassionate, and utterly fearless in her pursuit of fairness. She had a sharp legal mind that could cut through the most complex constitutional questions, and a quiet dignity that commanded respect the moment she entered a courtroom. Over nearly 2 decades, she had presided over hundreds of cases, many of them involving police misconduct and racial discrimination. Cases where she had held officers accountable for violating the very rights she now found herself fighting to protect. The burgundy sedan she drove wasn't just a car. It was a symbol, a tangible representation of everything she had worked for, every late night spent studying case law, every sacrifice made to reach the pinnacle of her profession. She had chosen it carefully, paid for it in full, and drove it with quiet pride. It represented the American dream she had been taught to believe in, that hard work, education, and dedication would be rewarded, that her achievements would speak for themselves. She had no idea that on this ordinary Tuesday afternoon, none of that would matter. Judge Pamela Wagner didn't come from privilege. She came from promise. The daughter of 2 high school teachers in Baltimore, she learned early that education was the great equalizer, the one thing no one could take away from you. Those lessons stuck. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through Georgetown Law School, sleeping 4 hours a night, surviving on coffee and determination. Her professors saw something special, a fierce intellect paired with an unshakable moral compass. After graduation, she could have joined any corporate firm and made a fortune, but money wasn't what drove her. Justice was. She spent 12 years as a civil rights attorney, representing the voiceless, the marginalized, the overlooked. Then came private practice, where she honed her courtroom skills to a razor's edge. When the call came from the White House, a federal appointment, she wept. 18 years on the bench had only deepened her commitment to fairness. She treated every case, every person, with dignity. The burgundy sedan wasn't extravagant by any means, but it was hers, paid in full, a quiet testament to late nights, sacrificed weekends, and unwavering dedication. That car represented everything she'd earned, everything she'd become, everything that was about to be taken from her. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove Lane as Judge Wagner turned onto her street, her mind still processing the testimony she'd heard that day. The neighborhood was peaceful. Manicured lawns, children's bicycles resting against garage doors, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Then came the flash of red and blue in her rearview mirror. She pulled over immediately, confused but compliant. She'd done nothing wrong. Officer Marvin approached her window with his hand resting on his service weapon, his face already set in stone. "License and registration," he said, no greeting, no explanation. She handed them over with a polite smile, adding her federal judicial identification card. "Is there a problem, officer?" His eyes barely glanced at her credentials before returning to her face. "This vehicle matches the description of a stolen car reported in the area." Judge Wagner blinked, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? This is my car. I've owned it for 3 years. You can verify. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. His tone had shifted. Colder. Final. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't interested in verification. He'd already decided. The smirk on his face told her everything. Legal reality check. The rule. An officer needs probable cause, specific facts suggesting a crime occurred, to make an arrest. A hunch isn't enough. The red flag. Officer Marvin claimed a stolen vehicle report existed. Didn't. He never verified. He never checked. The consequence. Without probable cause, every second Judge Wagner spent in custody was unlawful detention. The Fourth Amendment forbids it. Judge Wagner stepped out of the car, her hands visible, her voice steady despite the confusion swirling in her mind. Officer, there's clearly been a mistake. My registration is in the glove compartment. It shows I'm the legal owner. My insurance documents are there too. Marvin didn't move to check. He didn't ask permission to look. He just stared at her with that same cold expression. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? No, officer. I'm a federal judge. I showed you my identification. Please, just verify. Ma'am, you're under arrest for possession of a stolen vehicle. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. Her voice rose for the first time, professional composure cracking. Neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from next door stood frozen on her porch. The Johnsons stopped their evening walk mid-stride. They were watching. Everyone was watching as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Judge Wagner felt something break inside her. Are you doing this because I'm black? The question hung in the air, raw and desperate. Marvin said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence was answer enough. She was guided into the back of his patrol car, her dignity left behind on the pavement. Jury checkpoint. What the officer claimed. The vehicle matched a stolen car report. What the law requires. Officers must verify claims before arrest. Credentials presented by a suspect must be examined. Detentions require reasonable suspicion backed by specific, articulable facts. You decide. Officer Marvin had federal judicial ID in his hands. He refused to verify it. Was this procedure or profiling? Drop your answer below in the comment. Procedure or profiling? The county jail smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Judge Wagner was processed through the system she knew so well from the other side. Fingerprints rolled across the scanner, mugshot taken under harsh fluorescent lights, her personal belongings sealed in a plastic bag. Felony grand theft auto. The intake officer read aloud, barely looking up. The words felt surreal. She was placed in a holding cell with 5 other women, and that's when the recognition started. Judge Wagner? A young woman whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Oh my God, that's Judge Wagner. Another woman, someone whose sentencing hearing the judge had presided over just months earlier, stared in stunned silence. The irony was unbearable. She had sat on the bench, weighing evidence, dispensing justice, believing in the system's fundamental fairness. Now she sat on a metal bench in an orange jumpsuit, branded a criminal. Hours passed. 3, 4. Finally, they released her on her own recognizance. Of course they did, she was a federal judge, but the damage had been carved deep. Walking out into the parking lot, she couldn't shake the feeling that something essential had been stolen from her. Not her car, her faith. Legal reality check. The rule. False arrest occurs when someone is detained without legal justification. False imprisonment is holding someone against their will unlawfully. The red flag. Judge Wagner spent hours in jail for a crime that never happened. No stolen vehicle. No evidence. Just Officer Marvin's feeling. The consequence. Every minute she was detained became a constitutional violation. One the jury would later calculate in dollars. Jury checkpoint. What the officer claimed. He was following standard procedure for suspected vehicle theft. What the law requires. You can't arrest someone for grand theft auto without confirming the vehicle is actually stolen. Period. You decide. A federal judge held for hours. Fingerprinted. Photographed. Based on nothing. Was this an honest mistake? Or something worse? Yes or no? Should Officer Marvin have verified the stolen vehicle report before making the arrest? Drop your answers in the comment. The charges were dropped within 72 hours. A prosecutor reviewed the file and found what Judge Wagner had known all along. There was no stolen vehicle report, no matching description, no evidence whatsoever. Officer Marvin had acted on a hunch, and that hunch had been enough to destroy her sense of safety in the world. The case dismissed, file sealed, move along, nothing to see here. Except Judge Wagner couldn't move along. She stopped sleeping. Every night, she replayed the moment the handcuffs clicked shut, the neighbors staring, the humiliation of being fingerprinted like a common thief. Driving became an ordeal. Every police car in her rearview mirror triggered a spike of panic. Her hands would tremble on the steering wheel. At work, colleagues noticed her distraction during hearings. She'd lose her train of thought mid-sentence, haunted by a simple, devastating question. If this could happen to her, a federal judge with credentials and authority, what chance did ordinary black citizens have? The answer kept her up at night. None. They had no chance at all. That's when she made her decision. She wouldn't let this go. She couldn't. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who'd been presumed guilty simply for existing while black. She would fight. Legal reality check. The rule. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection. Police can't target people based on race. The red flag. Charges dropped in 72 hours. No evidence ever existed. Yet Judge Wagner's life was upended. The consequence. Dismissal doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't undo the arrest record, the mugshot, or the violation of dignity. That's why civil rights lawsuits exist. Question for the jury. If this happened to a federal judge, what happens to everyone else? Judge Wagner assembled a legal team that was as formidable as any she'd faced in her courtroom. 6 months after the arrest, they filed a federal civil rights lawsuit that pulled no punches. The complaint was devastating in its clarity. Racial profiling, false arrest, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments. Officer Marvin and the County Sheriff's Department were named as defendants. The lawsuit demanded accountability and damages, not just for Judge Wagner, but to send a message that this behavior would not be tolerated. The defense's response was predictable, almost insulting in its banality. Officer Marvin was acting on reasonable suspicion based on his training and experience. There was no racial motivation. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Unfortunate misunderstanding. As if her trauma could be dismissed with corporate legal speak. But discovery told a different story. Marvin's traffic stop records revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the previous 3 years, he had stopped black drivers in affluent neighborhoods at a rate 5 times higher than white drivers. His body camera footage from other stops showed the same condescending tone. The same skepticism when black citizens presented identification. The same rush to judgment. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was standard operating procedure. And now it would be exposed in open court. Legal reality check. The rule. Reasonable suspicion requires specific, observable facts. Training and experience can't justify racial profiling. The red flag. 5 times more black drivers stopped in affluent areas. Same neighborhood. Same officer. Same outcome. The consequence. Patterns prove intent. One stop might be a mistake. Dozens reveal a system. Jury checkpoint. What the defense claimed. Officer Marvin acted on reasonable suspicion and training. What the evidence showed. 3 years of disproportionate stops targeting black drivers in wealthy neighborhoods. You decide. One traffic stop is a moment. Pattern is a policy. Was this coincidence or targeting? Drop your answer below in the comments. The courtroom was standing room only. Media outlets lined the back row, cameras positioned outside, the nation watching. Judge Wagner sat at the plaintiff's table, no longer in her judicial robes but in a simple navy suit. When she took the stand, the room fell silent. Her testimony was precise, measured, but underneath ran a current of pain that no legal training could fully suppress. She described showing Officer Marvin her federal judicial identification, the confusion when he dismissed it without a second glance, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into her wrists as neighbors watched. Her voice wavered only once, when she recounted the booking process, standing in line for a mugshot while women she'd sentenced recognized her. "I felt invisible," she said quietly. "My credentials, my career, my entire life. None of it mattered. In that moment, I was just another black woman who didn't belong." Then came the evidence that would seal the case. The prosecution played Officer Marvin's body camera footage on the courtroom's large screen. Every word, every gesture, every dismissive glance was captured in high definition. The jury watched as Judge Wagner calmly presented her credentials. They watched Marvin barely look at them before tossing them back. But the most damning moment came from footage the defense hadn't known existed. Audio from Marvin's radio communication with another officer while Judge Wagner sat handcuffed in his patrol car. His voice crackled through the speakers. "Yeah, she's claiming to be some kind of judge. Federal, she says." A pause. Then, almost laughing, "She doesn't look like any judge I've ever seen." The courtroom erupted. The judge, the actual presiding judge, had to call for order. Expert witnesses followed, methodically dissecting the psychology of implicit bias and the statistical reality of racial profiling. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a leading researcher on police behavior, presented data showing that black drivers were 37% more likely to be stopped in affluent neighborhoods despite lower crime rates. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, damning. Jury checkpoint. What the officer said, "She doesn't look like any judge I've ever seen." What the law forbids, making decisions based on how someone looks, their race, their appearance, their perceived fit in a space. You decide. Officer Marvin had proof in his hands. He laughed it off. Was this about evidence or assumptions? Drop your verdict in the comment. Was race a factor? Yes or a no? The defense's strategy was damage control from the opening statement. Marvin's attorney, a seasoned litigator named Robert Kessler, painted his client as a dedicated officer who made an honest mistake under difficult circumstances. This was a case of mistaken identity. Nothing more, Kessler argued. Officer Marvin was doing his job, following proper procedure. There was no malice, no racial animus. Just an unfortunate series of errors that spiraled out of control. It sounded reasonable enough, until Officer Marvin took the stand. Under direct examination, he maintained his composure, reciting his version of events with rehearsed precision. But cross-examination was a different story. Judge Wagner's attorney, a civil rights veteran named Marcus Thompson, methodically dismantled every claim. "Officer Marvin, you testified that Judge Wagner's vehicle matched a stolen vehicle report. Can you produce that report?" Marvin shifted in his seat. "Well, I believed at the time. The question was simple. Can you produce the report?" "No, because it doesn't exist, does it? I was acting on information I'd received." "What information? From whom?" Silence. Thompson pressed harder. "You never verified a stolen vehicle report before arresting Judge Wagner, did you? You just had a feeling. Isn't that what you told investigators?" Marvin's jaw tightened. Yes, I had a suspicion." "And when Judge Wagner presented her federal judicial credentials, why didn't you verify them?" There wasn't time." "There wasn't time? You had her detained for over 3 hours, officer. You're telling this jury you couldn't spare 5 minutes to make a phone call?" Marvin stammered, his carefully constructed testimony collapsing. The sheriff's department attempted their own defense, arguing that inadequate training was to blame, not systemic racism. But that argument backfired spectacularly. If the training was inadequate, they admitted negligence. Either way, they were liable. The jury's faces told the story. They weren't buying it. Legal reality check. The rule. Qualified immunity protects officers acting in good faith. It does not protect officers who violate clearly established constitutional rights. The red flag. Marvin admitted no verification. No stolen vehicle report. Just a feeling. The consequence. When an officer acts on bias instead of evidence, immunity disappears. Accountability begins. Jury checkpoint. What the officer admitted. He never verified the stolen vehicle claim. He had no evidence. Just suspicion. What the law requires. Probable cause. Specific facts. Not gut feelings. You decide, 3 hours in custody. Federal credentials ignored. A phone call never made. Was this negligence or intent? Drop your answer below in the comment. Marcus Thompson's closing argument was brief but devastating in its simplicity. He stood before the jury, his voice steady and clear. This case isn't complicated. It's about a question as old as America itself. Do we live in a country where your skin color can make you guilty in someone's eyes, no matter your credentials, your character, or your contribution to society? He gestured toward Judge Wagner. She showed Officer Marvin her federal judicial identification. He didn't care. She explained the car was hers. He didn't listen. She asked why. He didn't answer. Because in his eyes, she didn't look like she belonged. Not in that car. Not in that neighborhood. Not in that life she'd built through decades of sacrifice and excellence. Your verdict will answer a simple question. Is that acceptable in America? We believe you'll say no. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom the next afternoon, Judge Wagner's hands trembled. The foreperson stood. We find in favor of the plaintiff. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $427,000 and punitive damages in the amount of $500,000. Total award, $927,000. The courtroom exploded. Applause, cheers, gasps of vindication. Judge Wagner, who had maintained her composure through months of depositions, testimony, and reliving her trauma, finally broke. Tears streamed down her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs that were equal parts relief and grief. Her legal team embraced her. Strangers in the gallery wept. This wasn't just a verdict. It was validation. It was justice, imperfect and long delayed, but real. Jury checkpoint. What the jury decided. $927,000 in damages. Accountability delivered. What the verdict means. Civil rights violations have consequences. Badges don't grant immunity from justice. You decide in the comments. Was this verdict justice? Or just the beginning? Comment below. Should Officer Marvin have faced criminal charges? Yes or no? The verdict made headlines from coast to coast. Federal judge awarded $927,000 in racial profiling case. News anchors debated it. Social media exploded with reactions. Town halls across America convened to discuss what it meant. The conversation Judge Wagner had sparked couldn't be ignored. Within weeks, the county sheriff's department announced sweeping reforms. Mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, new protocols requiring supervisors to review any traffic stop lasting more than 15 minutes, and body camera footage audits to identify patterns of discrimination. Officer Marvin faced an internal investigation that concluded with his resignation. He left law enforcement quietly, his career over, his actions a cautionary tale. But for Judge Wagner, the victory was deeply personal. In her first interview after the verdict, she spoke with characteristic grace. This was never about the money. It was about accountability. It was about saying that no one, no matter their badge, their authority, or their assumptions, is above the law. And no one, regardless of the color of their skin, is beneath its protection. Her voice carried the weight of experience now, tempered by pain but strengthened by purpose. She returned to the bench 3 months later, and something had changed. Her rulings were still sharp, her legal reasoning impeccable, but there was a new depth to her empathy. When defendants stood before her, she saw them differently, not as abstract legal problems, but as human beings navigating a system that didn't always see them clearly. Her trauma had become her teacher. The message reverberated far beyond that courtroom. Justice delayed is painful, but justice delivered even imperfectly, can still change the world. Final question for you. If Judge Wagner, with all her credentials, authority, and legal knowledge, could be profiled, arrested, and humiliated, who's safe? Drop your answer below in the comment. The body camera didn't lie, the evidence didn't lie, and the jury didn't look away. Judge Pamela Wagner's case exposed a truth too many people live with every day. That credentials, character, and contribution mean nothing when bias holds the gavel. But here's what this case also proved: accountability is possible. Change is possible. Justice, even when delayed, can still arrive. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you question what justice really means, subscribe. Because this channel exists to bring you the cases the system hopes you'll forget. The verdicts that rewrite the rules. The voices that refuse to be silenced. We don't sensationalize. We don't speculate. We document. We educate. We hold the line. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. And if you believe accountability matters, share this story. There are more cases like this. More officers who thought they were untouchable. More victims who refused to stay silent. And we're covering every single one. Drop your verdict below. The jury is waiting.